Okay, so this second tutorial, part 2 of this intro to Teams for DAS, is going to cover teams and channels. Now, these are two widely used terms within Microsoft Teams. A team refers to almost the highest level. If you think of a team as a committee and a channel as a subcommittee. And so what you want to do when thinking about governance of teams and how widely we use them, how readily we create individual teams, you want to think about the commonalities of a team. So for example, we have here within the side navigation that I'll go over in a separate video, we have all the teams that I'm currently a member of. Some of them, most of them in fact, have separate channels within them. Now, in the case of something like here, we have a biomedical science and healthcare science subject group team. Within that, it would make an enormous amount of sense to have a separate area or a separate thread within it, a subcommittee for each of the individual programs, okay? Or for research in that area, for staff within the subject group, whether they be healthcare science or biomedical science or a blend of both, to discuss research, placements, clinical educators, partnerships, things like that that really do have common ground with both programs. It would also make sense for subject groups like BESC, because you have biological, environmental, wildlife and science communication. And so it makes sense to have a subject group for all the common areas within that, but then it would make little sense to have separate areas for each individual program in there when there really will be no crossover. And that's what channels are for, and that's when you decide whether you want to make a team or a channel. So for example, there are some areas within biomedical science and healthcare science that are common and would be appropriate for a team. However, biomedical science, by the size of it and how much it overlaps with other programs and just how separate it is academically from healthcare science, it makes sense for it to have its own team. Within that, however, and this is where channels come in, within any team, there are going to be areas that would be those subcommittees that are common areas. So for example, if we are looking at research governance, you might have a team for AWEC, you might have a team for human tissue. It might make more sense, because some of the bureaucracy and administration between those two sides of research governance are similar, to have a team of research governance and then have a channel for AWEC and a channel for human tissue. And really you need to think about the memberships there. So for example, the biomedical science program team, the members of that are all teaching staff on biomedical science that are within the biomedical science and healthcare science subject group. As the team owner, I may want to invite other subject group members from BESC, such as those that are predominantly involved with biological sciences, who teach quite heavily on biomedical science, and therefore it would be appropriate for them to be a member of the group. However, any member of this team, this biomedical science program team, may not want to be involved with comment on, get notifications for, or work on files for every facet of the program. There may be one where we want to have just the microbiology staff, the staff that teach microbiology modules. We have one here for the physiology ones, and these are individual channels. Now, every team comes with it a general channel. That is the first channel, and all members of the team are by default members of that. You can change the notifications, and it's important to do this with each channel, because you have these two options here. The default is off for all new posts, because you don't want an email or a ping coming up every time someone posts something. But within a channel, you may want to know that something has been mentioned. If you're part of an ongoing chat, you don't want to miss out on a lot of that chat, because you haven't had time to go into Teams to check if there's anything relevant coming up. However, you also don't want to be bothered all the time. And so I would advise doing only show in feed as a notification, unless you are heavily involved in a particular channel, you're constantly commenting and working on files together, okay? Banner and feed. The banner means that a pop-up will appear in the corner of your screen like a notification. It will ping up and tell you that someone has mentioned you, replied to a post that you're involved in, has contacted you directly, something like that. In the feed means that it would appear in the activity bar up here, okay? So activity is where you would see all the recent posts of people that have mentioned you or replied to things. And so it's important to do those for each channel. Now, key within channels is there are two types of channel when you create it. So when you are making a channel, you click on the ellipses next to the team and you can add a channel, okay? When you are adding a channel, give it a name, you might want to give it a description, then the key thing is there are these two options down here. Standard, which is accessible to everyone on the team, so all members, and as you add new members, they will by default be able to see all channels that are standard, including general. Then there is also private, which is for a specific group of people. So private channels, you would add members from the team membership. You would think this would be a great way of keeping staff from being bothered by everything going on. So for example, within the physiology teaching strand private channel that I have here, the only members are, if I show you this, the members are me as the owner, and then we have these 5 guests, and those 5 guests are members of the physiology teaching team. Okay, that's very useful because people in other strands of teaching, other members of the general biomedical science program team, don't need to worry about seeing a lot of activity about things that we're posting in just this strand because it is private. Only we can see it, only we can access the files. The limitation, however, is that when creating a meeting, you can meet immediately, like calling a meeting, calling people up within the team, but you can't schedule a meeting because private channels don't appear in the meeting creator and within the sort of Outlook calendar built in that I'll go over in another video. So you need to bear in mind when creating channels whether the information within it is going to be genuinely confidential, that only a small number of people should be able to access it or see it, as well as the chats, or whether it's something where, yes, people will get notified if there's a meeting that they don't necessarily need to be involved in, but it enables everybody to schedule things for channels so that everyone knows the purpose of the meeting without having to type individual staff members into the Outlook meetings creator, because that way, if you have, say, a channel that has 20-25 members, you have to remember every member within it and then individually type their name. So it's just something to bear in mind with in thinking about whether you're going to make a meeting, a channel private or standard. It's particularly important because once it's created, you can't change that. You have to delete the team and make a new one with a similar but not identical name, because it saves deleted things a bit like a recycle bin just in case you want to retrieve them, and therefore it will tell you that a team already or a channel already exists with that name, so it needs to be subtly different. So my advice in general would be to just stick with standard teams. You wouldn't add specific members to them, but it means that you can work as those smaller teams. It's just that those smaller groups within a team. It's just that everyone in the larger team will be able to see. And generally speaking, there's no problem with this. But if there is genuinely confidential material that's going to be in there, if you don't mind typing individual team member names when scheduling a meeting, then do make it private. And I do have a further video on the limitations of teams at the moment before further updates occur that goes over this in a bit more detail. Important things to consider within whether it's a private or a standard channel is that every channel has its own chat, its own files tab, so the files stay within that channel, they don't get muddled up too much. Okay, so within this general one, there's everything I've put up there. If I then go to the physiology strand, teaching strand, I'll see that within the files tab there is different files, and so there's no chance of getting muddled, and so it's a way of still keeping everything separate and working together on files within particular tabs. So that's teams and channels, just things to consider within them. As always, more than happy to cover to answer any queries. Please do get in touch if there's anything you're at all confused about. It's just some things to think about there in terms of whether you create a team, or whether you create multiple teams, or whether you create multiple standard channels within a team. You need to think about your sort of governance hierarchy before you do any of those things, and that's why it's worth some wider discussions in some instances. Okay, thank you very much.